All right, here we go. Today we have former smuggler Johnny Mitchell. Welcome to Vlad TV.
What's up, buddy? Good to be here.
Thank you for coming. You've been making your rounds, I see.
Yeah. You know, we got to do it.
Yeah, doing your thing.
Yeah.
Congrats, man.
Trying, man.
Congrats,
this YouTube shit's taken a lot out of me.
Well, yeah, I mean, the fact that you've actually created your own channel and built it up somewhat recently is very impressive because it's a very crowded, field these days.
Oh, my God. It's worse than the game.
Yeah.
There's more competition than the bro. Can't believe it, man. I'm looking for the next lick.
There you go. It's your first time here. I want to start at the very beginning. So you grew up in Portland, Oregon.
Yes, sir.
And you grew up middle class.
Yes. Solidly middle class.
Okay. One parent home, two parent home?
Two.
Okay.
Two. My dad was a lawyer. Couldn't keep me out of prison. Not a very good lawyer. But, and my mom was, the best. She had a job. Everything was normal. It was really like an amazing time to grow up. Everybody had their parents. Nobody was spoiled. It was like that 90s middle class, pretty mixed still. We had black kids in the neighborhood. We had, we all kind of grew up in this culture of hustling, but still educated, if that makes sense.
Well, so you're going to high school, and around 16 years old, you start selling.
Yeah.
You started out with just dime. Okay. What made you sell weed when you have, a middle-class family and both parents are providing and so forth?
Well, I never wanted that. I never wanted to be normal. First it was hooping, right? Because I grew up in the Jordan years. And then it was trying to be a rapper. And then when none of that panned out, I was like, okay, well, I like smoking weed. And we would look up to like our friends' older brothers or uncles. Everybody had somebody in the business back then in the Northwest. Like the game in the early 2000s, the rush was a lot like, crack was to the ghetto in the 80s. That's kind of how I compare it. Like everybody had something. And so when I found out that you could make a living, not even get rich, I had no idea you could do that. Like when I found out that my best friend's older brother was paying his rent, just selling, didn't have a job or anything like that, I was like, oh, I'm in. Sign me up.
Okay, so you start out with dime bags in high school, and then you go to college at the University of Oregon, and that's when things ramped up.
Yeah.
So what happened next?
So we spent about 3 or 4 years just selling some bits, like I didn't have any connections. I didn't have any silver spoon. We just worked our way up, and then we met the connect, and that's what changed everything. You meet the you get a better price. Now you're giving out packs to street dealers, and eventually you've now got guys picking up 5-10 pounds from you at a time, and now you have a little trade going. But meeting the connect, meeting the growers, which were originally these like rednecks, I call them, these just kind of working class dudes from Southern Oregon, these tiny little towns where some of the best outdoor in the country, probably to this day, is grown. And so I just met a guy through a friend from college, and we'd go down and start picking up pounds at a time.
Okay, so you start working with the growers and picking up pounds, but you also dabbled in some cocaine around that time.
Yeah.
You got a kilo.
Yeah, so when the would dry up, this is going to be wild for your younger viewers, but the could actually all get smoked up. It was called the drought. I sound like the oldest guy in the room, but if by August or September, the crop from the harvest the previous year would be all sold out. So these thousands of pounds that all these traffickers like me would pick up and get off would run out. And so to prevent our pockets from, getting a hole burned into them, we would go get some coke and get it off like that. So yeah, we went as far as driving out to San Diego one weekend and picking up a whole key, and we got it off in like, a day and a half. It's pretty wild.
Right. You said kilos cost $25,000 back then?
Yep.
Seems kind of high.
Well, we were fucking white boys, probably got ripped off. You know what I mean? We didn't know anything. We didn't know shit, But it's good blow. So if we can bust that down into, $100 a gram, more or less. And, we sold it off in ounces too, but say we got $60 a gram off of paying 25, we still, did better than doubling up.
Yeah, I mean, my regular viewers are about to roll their eyes when they hear this because they know what's coming next. But when I was in my 20s, after watching Deep Cover, I had the brilliant idea that me and my best friend at the time, who was black, who was a former drug dealer himself, I would finance buying a kilo, and he bought it, and, we would, he would sell it, and we would split the money and re-up or whatever else. Long story short, he ripped me off, right? I gave him $17,000. This is why I said the 25 sounds a little high, because I remember I bought the key for $17,000 through him, and he just ripped me off. He said, oh, it wasn't real, but, I'll fix it and whatever, and I'll pay you back and whatever.
And he ran off with the bread?
He just ran off with the money. Oh. Yeah, and that was it. And it was a very interesting moment where I had to realize, because I didn't really think this out all the way, right? I remember talking to drug dealer friends later on. They were like, you need to stay with the money. You couldn't just leave the money and have them come back. Right. You need to be there at every step and so forth. I didn't know any of this stuff. This was my first drug transaction ever in life. But when he ripped me off, I was like, my only option is to kill him or seriously, hurt him. And then now I open myself up to more potential legal problems or put my own life in danger. Okay, I'm not built for this. I'm not built for the cocaine trade. So that was it.
Had to swallow it.
I had to just swallow it. And I was so angry about this for years. I was bitter about it. Even when my money started to increase and that amount of money really didn't matter. And I remember I interviewed Freeway Ricky Ross, and I told him the story for the first time on camera. He said, well, you do realize that if he didn't rip you off, you would have probably gone to prison eventually. And I said, I never thought of it that way.
Did you a favor?
I said, wow, he's absolutely right. And since then, I've talked about it on camera so many times that I've made way more than $17,000. I probably made over $100,000 just talking about it.
Right.
So,
exactly.
If I ever run into the guy again, I would be like, don't worry about it, man. It's all good. But it was definitely like a light bulb went off over my head that like, I'm not built for this drug game.
Right.
And let me just never touch this again.
Yeah. I wasn't built for it either. It was just such a low risk when it came to the market, which was a college town. So, there were wolves, guys that would come in and pretend to be students, guys from Oakland, big black guys, or, dudes from Portland that clearly like never even finished high school, but they're pretending to be college students. And they would find, drug dealers that weren't violent dudes and they would just rob them. Yeah. But aside from that, it was such it just really, I didn't look at it as there was ever a chance I could be killed, but no, I didn't like it. I was always terrified of handling that stuff. So I tried to only touch the yayo when I had no other choice, when there was no bubble,
Okay, so you're building up your operation and, you talked about how a lot of the best weed was coming from either Southern Oregon or Humboldt County. And I remember I went to school at UC Berkeley, and I remember we took a trip to Humboldt this one time, and it was definitely a haze of, I don't think I'd ever been that high before off of weed. So it was, the best stuff was coming from Humboldt at that time. And I didn't know about Oregon, but I guess it's all relatively close to each other. So
yeah, it's all that whole forest. I think it's like the Siskiyou forest, and then it comes down into like the Mendocino forest. It's all pretty much connected. So Mendocino, Humboldt, and whatever county that right off the I-5 as you're coming into California. The whole entire region's economy was buffered by weed money. It was the only thing going on. We would go down to Garberville, this tiny little town. It was like the gateway to Mendocino County. And we would just rent a room for a day to make our re-up. This is where we started meeting the Mexicans that we eventually were picking up from. And a little room at like a shitty Travelodge Inn with cigarette burns in the carpet would cost you $250. It's because they knew there were millions of dollars getting passed behind those doors every day. It was a real fascinating time in the history of the drug trade.
Well, yeah, you talked about how during this time, the mid-2000s, the West Coast weed wasn't reaching the East Coast yet.
Not en masse.
Right. And I remember when I read this, I had moved to New York around 2002, and I remember hanging out in the studios, and the guys were like, "Oh, you're from the West Coast? Yo, do you got a weed connect?" You know what I mean? And I by that time, I'm like, I'm nothing drug related. Am I even touching?
Right.
No, I'm not making any phone calls. I do know some people probably, but no, I'm not touching it. But you're right. At that point, the West Coast weed wasn't hitting the East Coast yet. So you saw that as a potential market.
Absolutely, yeah. And it started getting harder and harder to turn a real profit selling domestically to drug dealers on the West Coast because there's just more and more product coming online, more people are growing. So that was like a valve to stay in business. I looked at it as like survival of the business. But then when I realized, oh no, there's millions to be had here, I'm like, we got to get this now. Because we also saw the legalization was coming.
Haha.
So that was the other thing. That was the other threat to the business.
Yeah, I remember, when was this? This was before I moved to New York, so around 2000, 2001. That's when the early stages, this was happening in Berkeley with lawyers like Tony Serra that were starting to pass the laws to make weed legal, first in the Bay Area, and it started to spread.
That's right.
So you already saw it coming.
Yeah, and I think medical marijuana was already legal.
It was already there. Yeah,
Yeah, it was already
you needed
there.
a card, but anyone would give you a card, so it didn't matter.
Right, exactly. So I'm like, shit, we're like 5 years out from. I looked at it. I was like, these pounds are gonna be worth nothing. Like it's gonna be. Everybody will have it. They're gonna sell it in stores, which happened.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, we got to make millions now. It was the opposite of how most people viewed it. They're like, once it's legal, you know, we can pop our heads up and, you know, market it on the internet like people do now. And we can, we can open up a dispensary and really help people. I never looked at weed as like a culture. I never was into weed culture. I think it's kind of dumb. Like I smoked weed, but I looked at it as an outlaw business.
Yeah.
That's how I viewed it. I had no interest and I have no interest in getting into the marijuana, the cannabis industry. So it was like I was part of the last generation of like real black market weed workers that weren't part of a cartel, weren't part of some kind of organization. Just a guy with some balls.
Well, at one point you met some kids whose fathers were mobsters from Philadelphia.
Yep.
And you guys set up a whole operation that way?
That's right. And so that was the final shoe to drop, right? I had to connect, so I'm getting it for the low, but now I need the buyer who's going to buy it for high. So that took a couple of years to make that marriage come together. But when it did, now I'm getting it. If I'm buying from Mexican guys, I'm getting it for like $2,000 a unit. And I'm selling it to these kids in Philly for 33 to 35. And they're picking up 10, 20 at a time. You see how that margin becomes $1 million operation quickly.
Okay. And then in 2008, you met a Mexican plug.
That's right.
So this guy was part of the cartel.
Yeah. And it was probably Sinaloa, but I don't know for sure. You know, they don't talk like that, right? But I heard from their accents because I speak pretty good Spanish and I've spent a lot of time in Mexico. It's a Sinaloa accent that they're talking in, right? And the slang is similar. So it was just a bunch of growers, bunch of guys that they send up north every year to hike into the fields. Like they march for hours and hours up these mountainsides in places like Humboldt. They set up these huge gardens. And then after they harvest it, trim it, they bust it down and they meet up with guys like me. And that's just how we rocked for, 2 years.
Okay. And you talked about how in weed, there really is not an extreme amount of violence like cocaine, heroin, meth, and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue there's not even a lot of violence, even in those businesses, when you reach a certain level. There's treachery, there's a lot of snitching. But stateside, I didn't see a lot of it after you ascend to a place where you're every deal is you're transacting millions of dollars. Everybody's a businessman at that point. And so, yeah, it was really a privilege to be able to be at that level, because most people in the drug game, and you can ask anybody that comes on your show, most people have no success, and they end up getting killed or strung out, or they go to prison early. So I felt like I had made it, because there was no violence after I met these supposedly violent cartel guys. It was just all business.
Well, you were always paying them.
Sure. And
I'm sure if you miss some payments, it might be a little different.
They always wanted to front me like double what I was picking up. So if I was picking up 50 bricks, 50 pounds, they'd always say, "Oh, take another 50, man." And I'm like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm going to be COD," because I didn't want to owe them. Because if something gets fucked up, if I get pulled over, if I get popped or whatever, now I'm on the hook for an extra 100,000.
Okay. What was the biggest deal that you did during this time?
Just 50.
So you stuck to 50?
Just 50 pounds.
50 pounds. And that was how much?
Because then my re-up's only $120,000.
So 50 pounds will cost you $120,000.
Yeah, just about. Whatever, 2,200. I get it for about 2,200. Maybe 2,000 would be like the lowest I could get them down. See, the prices of the pound kept dropping. So I kept getting better deals as more and more of these groups started growing huge amounts. It actually dropped the wholesale price. So I could go to 3 or 4 different growing groups and play their prices off of each other. But let's just say conservatively it was 2,200 a pound times 50 pounds, so about 120 G's. And off of that, you're turning over, selling a pound for $3,500.
You're not paying taxes.
Yeah, you're goddamn near doubling your money off of weed.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can never do that now. It was just an amazing stroke of like luck and historical factors that allowed me to do that.
Well, how would the handoff happen? Like, how would you get 50 pounds and give them $120,000 and not worry that someone's, the police are swooping in and so forth?
Yeah, that was the terrifying part for sure.
Yeah.
I sent, at the end, I had everybody driving down for me. I send a nice college student. This was like the recession, right? So nice white college kids had no job. And so I would send them with the re-up money down to meet, and they would load up and then just drive back. And we had one spotter car, and they went the speed limit, and they had a backstory. And, we had a couple of close calls when I was driving, got pulled over a few times, but we never got popped on the highway.
Well, what's crazy when I was going through your story is that once you got it and you started to move it around, you were moving it through FedEx.
That's right.
That's
right.
wild.
So listen.
I would be terrified to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, once it leaves your hands and it goes into this FedEx facility, sorting, and God knows what they do and check, and there's dogs and this and that, because when you look at the big, like a BMF operation, they're not sending stuff through FedEx. They had limos with special compartments, and, everything was airtight, and there were special combinations to open the compartments. And even when the police would seize the cars, they wouldn't be able to find anything and whatever else. But you guys just put in a FedEx box and go to the FedEx store and hope for the best.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, we weren't so cowboy with it. Like, we had a real precision method for sucking all the air out of it. But yeah, my thought process was, okay, possession is 9/10 of the law. You've heard that?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm putting it in a box, giving it to somebody else, putting fake names, no fingerprints on it, and sending them down to ship a box of drugs across the country, I'm creating a layer of separation between myself and the drugs and the buyer. Now, of course, we know that if the DEA is really involved, that doesn't matter. They don't have to catch you with any drugs or money on you. They can still put a case on you. But that's the risk. That's the risk.
I mean, but there's cameras at the FedEx location.
So we're sending it FedEx overnight. they got to compete with UPS and now the post office. By the way, the United States Post Office, good looking. They moved a lot of product for me too, you know? So, yeah, it was just that never crossed my mind. And this was before you had to, now I understand that if you send out a package, you have to present an ID at FedEx. You didn't have to do that back then.
Aha.
So that was a workaround too.
Okay. So you'd be sending, I mean, how much did you actually send through FedEx? If you were to just eyeball it right now.
1,000 pounds.
1,000 pounds
Yeah.
through FedEx.
Yeah. So I don't know how many boxes that is. We'd only put about 5 pounds in a box. You can put, I've heard people putting as much as 10 in a box, dumping 10 pounds into a huge food saver and then just shrinking that bitch down. But we've only put about 5 in a box. So do the math, maybe, 400 boxes, right?
Okay. So
and we got most of them through.
Okay. So you send 5 pounds in a box, and that's worth how much?
5 pounds times, say I'm giving it to him for 33, 17 grand or something like that.
Yeah, right around 17 grand. How would you get the money back? They would send the cash back to
Same
FedEx?
goddamn way, baby.
Now that's illegal as well. You can't send $17,000 worth of cash in a FedEx box.
Correct. But it's even easier. So they put it, now I don't want to bury the lead, but this would eventually be my undoing, was the money. But, cash, 17 grand is not that much. You could take like an old box of like baseball cards. It's just like a little rectangle like that. Line it all up with, 50s and 100s and shrink it up and send it off. So, yeah, I wanted to throw volume at the problem. I didn't want to, a lot of people send couriers, would actually fly to go meet the box and collect the cash and drive it back. Who has time for that? I'm sending off 3 or 4 boxes a week. More than that by the end. I'm sending off 2 boxes a day. So it's like if one gets popped, the others are getting through. And I'm still making a profit because the investment is so low. Paying $2,000 for a pound, it's like I can afford, if a box gets lost, that sucks, but it's not going to bankrupt me.
Okay, so how many boxes would get lost, be it weed or cash?
I think 3 boxes of weed got lost out of 450. 3 boxes. And then the cash, 2 packages of cash, and then the final one that got hit by the dog.
Yeah.
By the feds.
I mean, I think a lot of the reason why people don't stick to is that it's way cheaper than or right?
Pills is huge now.
Yeah, it's huge. So it's like you're doing all this work for, it's good money, but it's not huge money. So a lot of people say, okay, cool, I'm going to graduate to.
Yeah.
It's the same box, it's the same process, and I'm going to make 10 times the amount, right? So why did you never graduate to other substances?
Well, do you make 10 times the amount though off a kilo? I'm not sure you do. And if my
what I'm saying is a kilo is worth $17,000, $20,000, whatever. A kilo is worth how much?
A pound of is worth $3,500.
Right. So this is 5 times as much for the same amount.
But how much are you buying it for? What's your profit margin? That's all that matters.
I got you.
So unless the lowest you're going to, look, I talk to guys all day that were buying, directly from the Juarez, from the Sinaloa Cartel. They were the first ones to receive the work after it crossed the border. Like, this is the level they're at. And they're making 2 points off a kilo. They're getting it they said the lowest they could get it for was like 15 or 16 for pure. And they turn around and give it to their guys for 18. So that's the level I wanted to be at. If you want to make bigger money than that, you'd have to start cutting it. And it's just, you increase your complication and your risk. So even if I could make 3 points off of a wholesaling a kilo and only make 1 point off a pound of, what's a couple of years in versus 15?
Yeah.
When it's, I'm still making millions of dollars with that's my thought process. And plus I wasn't plugged in like that. Really, the black market at that level, to be a wholesaler at that level, you really got to be deep in the streets to make those kind of connections.
Yeah, I've always been, I've scratched my head when you start doing the math because you're right, it's like 3%. If I were to get into a regular business, a legal business, and I'm only making 3%, I would probably get out of that business.
Right.
You see how I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you compound that with time.
Right.
And security and ripoffs. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I can't believe anybody gets into it.
Yeah, I don't understand why people get into it. And every single person, remember I did the math once, I think like for every year that you make money off the street with something like, you'll do about 5 years, right? You have a 3-year run, 15 years.
Do about 15.
5-year run, 25 years. It's kind of, when you look at the numbers with people I've interviewed, because I've interviewed a lot of the kingpins,
right.
The freeway Ricky Rosses, the convertible Berts, the list goes on and on.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually that.
Yep.
So you have a tiny profit margin, huge risk, and huge punishment.
Right.
Why even do it?
Yeah, and the Big Meech, what they were doing was they were whacking it. They came up at the right time and they were buying low, and then they were stepping on it and busting it down into, smaller amounts. That's the arbitrage. In short, that's how you make the big money off. But now, man, I mean, they're doing 30 and some people got killed, and it's just, look at me.
Yeah.
I'm 190 pounds soaking wet. What am I going to I'm not running a transnational operation,
No, I hung out with those guys.
Yeah.
I hung out with Big Meech. Yeah, I was at his house. And it was...
Oh, before he got popped.
Well, yeah, this was when he was on house arrest, yeah. This was after Wolf got killed, Puffy's old bodyguard. But, I'm in Atlanta looking around, and the world is BMF's billboards.
Yeah.
Everyone got Ferraris and Lamborghinis. Everyone's wearing $500,000 worth of jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
They have a quote-unquote record label, but they're only artists no one's purchasing.
Blue Da Vinci.
Blue Da Vinci, right. No offense to Blue Da Vinci, but no one was buying.
Yeah.
It's not like his album sales were financing this. It was clear. He was a new artist at that time. So I'm looking around going like, all y'all going to, like, I don't want to be part of this.
Right.
Let me, nicely move away and keep my distance from this, even though they're a very embracing organization. If you want to be down with BMF, you're now hanging out with BMF whenever you want. But I'm like, nah, I'm cool. This is too dangerous.
Yeah. And what do I look like? And I don't begrudge, some guys that come from a slum in Culiacan or Detroit, like the Flannery brothers. But also it's like, for me to take it there, it would be such a cliche. It would be so stupid. Like, your dad is a lawyer. You come from a great community. It just, even I wasn't that dumb.
Okay. Well, at one point, your stash house gets raided.
Yes.
They find 5 pounds of weed. But you get pretty much just a slap on the wrist.
Yeah. So that was 2009. I had some buddies living in a house where I kept the work. That was common. You pay people to keep your shit. And so I got raided. I took all the heat, because I feel bad. These are like legit guys. They got futures. So I was on felony probation. And, the cops are like, hey, you're young. Let's just bring me to your guys or whatever. You probably won't even get a misdemeanor. And I was like, yeah, I can't do that, because I knew the game was really about to explode with the ship and the weed. So I was like, I definitely am not going to fucking rat on my connects. I need those guys. Think about what insane thinking that is, So yeah, but now it's really for real. Now I know if I get busted again, I'm going down. Unfortunately, the money like 10x'd, so I probably should have taken a step back, but
Didn't you go to Colombia after the raid?
Yeah, I went to Colombia, but I was already on probation. So I've been going back and forth for a while. I traveled there at the end of college. I lived in Argentina. Actually, that's how I met my Italian connection in South Jersey. Traveled in Ecuador, traveled in Colombia. And after I got raided and, took care of my legal shit, I flew there because I was planning on purchasing a piece of property in northern Colombia, the city called Cartagena. It was starting to explode with Americans, with like foreigners. Like the stink of the old days, Pablo Escobar and all the drug wars, that was kind of coming to an end. People were coming to Colombia and being like, oh shit, this place is fucking dope. So that was going to be one of my laundering schemes, was buying just a piece of raw land in this perfect part of Cartagena, and then I was just going to sit on it, maybe sell it to a developer. There's probably a fucking huge hotel there today.
Okay. That didn't work out, though.
That didn't work out.
Okay. So you came back to the U.S.?
Yeah, I came back to the U.S. and, I have a friend when I leave the country for these tiny little month hiatuses. I have a friend who kind of looks after things. But that's when I really started shipping. That's when, I meet guys in Washington Heights. I've got my guys in Jersey, Philly. I have some guys in Ohio. I have some guys in Maryland. And that's when I buckle down and say, okay, it's time to get rich.
Right. You said one of the hardest things about the business at that point was where to keep the cash.
Yeah, of course.
And there was a situation where you had a garbage bag filled with 50,000. And something interesting happened with that bag.
Yeah, it was 40,000. It was 40 racks. Still a lot of money though. I was making about 50 a week, but it's not something you'd like to lose. I was putting money everywhere, right? Just trying to figure out how to launder it. I would bury shit in my parents' garden. I had, money in fucking safe deposit boxes under different people's names. I had cash in storage units. And then I slept with like 400,000 in a safe next to my bed, right? Because that's how I slept good at night, So I remember I had 40 G's come through, and I stopped by my parents' house, the house I grew up in, and I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do with this. Let me just put this in like a trash bag, and I'll just keep it here just for a couple of days, just until I think about where else to put this money. So I put 40 G's in like a trash bag, and I go up to my parents' bedroom and I put it under their sink. And the next day I come back and I say, hi, Mom. And I go upstairs and I look under the sink in her bathroom. The trash bag's gone. And I was like, hey, Mom, did you see a garbage bag under here by chance? She goes, oh, yeah, I saw that yesterday. I didn't know what it was, so I just threw it in the garbage can. It is a trash bag after all. And I was like, when's garbage day? She goes, oh, it was this morning. There you go. There you go.
40,000 gone.
40,000 gone.
Okay, and did you actually tell your mom what was in the bag?
I did, because I was furious.
Okay.
I mean, I swallowed, my parents kind of knew what I was doing. But I was like, Mom, that's 40 grand. And that kind of, that she felt awful. To her credit, she was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But, at the same time, she was like, wow, what are you doing? You have $40,000? Like, I thought you were just kind of selling weed to your friends. So that's kind of what what woke them up to what their son was doing,
I mean, did you think about laundering the money, buying a business, something like that? People buy laundromats, people buy property, people buy hotels. I mean, not hotels, but motels and so forth.
Well, that's what I was learning as I was going, right? Like, that's what kind of woke me up to investing. Like, I was reading, books about real estate, about, how to buy a business. But it's all happening so fast, and I had no help, that it was just, it all came too quickly. If this had happened to me now at 38, not 23, 24, it would be a whole different story. But yeah, I would do things like I would promote shows, concerts and shit like that, rap shows, like Nipsey Hussle before he was famous, flew him up to do a show. Yeah.
So Nipsey Hussle was paid with weed money.
Of course. Yeah. I can't be the only one, dude. Yeah, no, I would do things like I started like buying sneakers and would like resell them on the internet, right? So I was like, okay, this is a way to start like cleaning up the cash right away in small, just small bits, and then creating a company around it. Like I was learning about how you form an LLC, and then the idea with Colombia came, and I was like, okay, that's my ticket. That's where after I clean up this street money and turn this into a couple $100,000, this is how I move that in bulk to, wire that down to Colombia.
Well, you stack up almost $1 million in cash.
Yeah.
And then you get caught.
I actually had over $1 million.
Okay, how much you have?
They didn't get all of it, but it doesn't matter at this point. It's all gone. It was like 1.15.
Okay.
So I mean, that's the drug dealer's dream, right? Like, so in certain ways, I kind of made it, which is pretty remarkable, because I started out selling dime bags of weed, and I had no criminal connections. I had nobody with guns, and I'd been through it all. I'd been robbed at gunpoint. I'd been arrested. I'd been all this kind of crazy shit.
Robbed at gunpoint for what?
Oh yeah, back in the day for weed.
Okay.
For weed, I was in college. Is one of these stick-up kids. Found out where we were holding work and ran in with ski masks and like little bitch-ass 22s and waving them around. And we were like, okay, dude, just because we didn't have the real mother load at the house. We just had like a couple ounces of weed, right? But it's still wild. Like, and we're always around civilians. We're not around, me and my co-D, my best friend, we're not around like gangsters. We're around like normal people, and they're taking the brunt of what's happening. They're getting guns put in their face. They're getting, handcuffed when the stash house gets raided and shit like that. But yeah, so, that kind of like street shit. And we tied a guy up one time and took his work, right?
So you kidnapped somebody.
Yeah, that is kidnapping, I guess, right? It is. Yeah, we ran in there, just some little Asian guy. And I hope if he's watching, I hope he's doing very well. And I apologize. And I hope I've paid for it. Because it was a mistake. We definitely put him out of the game though. So hopefully he never did anything illegal after this. But yeah, just little shit like that, tied him up and took his shit, took his weed, took his money because we had just got robbed. So that's kind of the way it worked. We were sloshing around in the muck of the game for a long time. So the fact that I'm now discussing buying a piece of real estate with drug money in Colombia with like professional money launderers, it's kind of surreal. Like I felt like I had hit the jackpot, truly. The fact that I had made this connection, these guys buying these, as much weed as I could supply them, honestly, it made me believe I could do anything.
Well, but the police ended that whole police.
Yes.
So
what goes
you
up
actually
must come down.
Right. So you actually got caught not with drugs, but with money.
That's right.
How did they catch you?
So FedEx was my bottom bitch until she turned on me. So I had, it was coming out of Jersey, the Italian kids, the Dominicans up in Washington Heights. It was always smooth, but sometimes they wouldn't wrap my money correctly. They wouldn't vacuum seal it. And $20,000, $30,000 worth of drug money, 5, 10s, and 20s, it reeks of weed and cocaine and people's ass. It's disgusting, right? That's what a dog will smell that. And so they evidently didn't wrap the money the right way. And it was in a FedEx package. It was going through like a sorting facility in, I think it's in like Memphis, Tennessee, where they sort all the packages. And a drug sniffing dog just hit on it, which is what the game is. It's a lottery. That's going to happen eventually if you're selling drugs through the mail. So they tracked it all the way to Portland.
Well, they put a tracking device on it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they tracked it to your house, and then the feds came and they busted you.
it wasn't the feds at first. It was just the feds informed just the local pigs, right? Just the local Portland Vice Squad. They tracked it to my house. I was getting ready to leave to go to the airport to go meet. I was flying down to San Diego to meet this Colombian shorty, and yeah, they knocked on the door, and I was like, "Oh, this is it," and I let them in, and I think at the house, probably I had close to $500,000 just at the house, which is a mistake. I never kept any work there, but I always had to have the money on me before I moved it. It was a mistake, but it's how I operated, right? I can trust people with the merchandise, but I can't trust anybody with the money. So immediately they called up the DEA. They were like, whoa. And I knew they didn't really know anything, because if the cops are asking you who you are, what you're doing, that means they need information. It means they don't know anything. So they were like, what the fuck have we stumbled into? So yes, now I have DEA, and I tried to bribe the cops too. This is such a cowboy story. This is such a fucking cowboy story, dude.
Okay, you try to bribe the cops. How?
There's only 3 of them there. I'm like, guys, this is $500,000. I will take you to another 300,000. Okay, your supervisor's not even here.
Right.
This never happened.
This is before body cams.
This is before body cams.
Right.
Yeah.
So you could actually have a private conversation with the police officer.
And they're plainclothes. So it's like, guys, the neighbors don't even know that. Like, I think they had turned their lights off because I was so cool. Like, I didn't make them kick the door in. I was like, just come in. And I was so mellow that I was like, guys, look, you don't even just give me a day's head start. Take the cash. I will make a run for it. That's all I was offering. I wasn't even like saying, hey, I'll bring you, 100,000 every week or something like that.
Well, I mean, in retrospect, when they showed up at your door, you didn't have to let them in, right?
No, they were going to go get a warrant. They had I had taken them on a high speed. I had taken them on a high speed because I collected the packages of money I never got them delivered straight to my door. I wasn't that stupid. I would get them sent to different addresses and different post office boxes. So that's where they traced it to. So I picked it up. This is hours before. I see a Suburban getting behind me and I see the lights go on. I was driving a Dodge Charger, which is back then that was like the hot drug dealer car, right? And you fucking go, I mean, you could really dust some fools with that. So I panicked and I just like floored it through like residential neighborhoods. And I look back, they didn't even try to chase me. Wild. And I asked my lawyer why, and he goes, local cops have a mandate usually to not get in high-speed chases through like residential areas, because if they, kill somebody walking across the street, they're liable.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's good to know. So I had actually, and nobody knew where I lived. So I parked the car near my parents' house. I waited it out for a couple of hours, and I said, okay, maybe that was a fucking mistake. Maybe they weren't even like, what is going on? Maybe they're not coming for me at all. So I go back home, back to where I was staying, these furnished apartments that I would rent. And then, half an hour later, I have no idea how they found me.
Well, they had a tracking device on the package?
That's how they found me.
Yeah.
So, and I should have fucking ripped the package open, right? But your adrenaline is coursing through your veins, right? So I'm in fight or flight mode from the jump. And yeah, they knocked on the door and, they're fucking, they're threatening to kick the door down and all this shit. And I'm like, okay, I put you guys through enough. Come on in. So maybe they could have got a warrant. I mean, they were going to get a warrant. They got warrants to open the safe. They got warrants for all this other shit. So, always make the cops get warrants is the rule. But I was like, look, if they're going to take my money, I need to start playing ball. So I let them in and they searched everything. They brought out all the cash. And that's when I said, guys, are you guys cool? Hey, we're cool. I'm cool.
Let's all be cool.
They were not cool.
They were not. Okay, so when you offer to bribe them, how'd they react?
The younger guy was like the cowboy. He threatened to like punch my teeth in. You know what I mean? It got like, I thought they were going to beat the shit out of me. And I was like, relax, dude. This is how the entire world used to operate. So if they had been cops on the East Coast, if they had been, you know, some Dominican guys from Queens, they might have taken it, right? But these are Boy Scouts from Portland, Oregon. So then the other guy was like, okay, we're gonna fucking charge him with that too.
Bribery.
So they put a bribery charge on me. But there's no body cams, nobody's recording. So my lawyer, we immediately got that thrown out later.
Okay.
Because it's just hearsay. I'm like,
yeah,
hey,
but there's
what happened?
three. Wait, it doesn't quite work that way. Because there's 3 police officers who are all corroborating the same story, and police officers are considered expert testimony. It's not like a random person on the street.
Right.
3 cops, they're all telling the exact same story. You would think you get hit with that bribery charge.
Well, I did get hit with it, but they dropped it.
But they dropped it. Okay.
You know, I did. Yeah, I know. I definitely was on my paperwork. Because when you first go to jail and you see the charges, you're like, I did all that shit? That's just wild. So then the DEA's in my living room now, and they're like, they immediately assumed I was working for a cartel. So they were convinced. They were like, okay, yeah, you can take us to like a whale. But the reality, I wasn't working for a cartel. I was just a drug trafficker that had some cartel connects.
Well, but you could have potentially connected them with some of your plugs.
Absolutely.
And walked away.
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you consider it?
Yeah. Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah, Vlad. Oh.
Because, in the beginning, they were probably saying, like, how many years were they threatening you with early on?
I was already on about 5. I was looking at about 5.
Okay.
I knew I was going to go down regardless. I was on probation. So when you're on felony probation and you get busted for doing the exact same thing while you're on probation, you're at least going to get a probation violation. So I knew I was at least looking at like 2 just for that, even if I beat the whole fucking thing. Right. So I figured I was looking at about 5, and they they overcharge you. This is the way the system works. The prosecutor, the AUSA, right? Like my case, you're in the feds, or being charged federally. Yeah, they throw as much at you to try to get you to scare you so you can plea out and probably fuck yourself, especially if you don't have a lawyer. Thank God I had a good lawyer.
Okay, so now you're in jail.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the county.
Yep. So they spent hours trying to get me to flip, and I probably could have walked. And I'm just like, the smartest thing I ever did, because I'm so overwhelmed. I'm exhausted. The adrenaline's dumping. People who've never been arrested at this kind of level don't understand the fear and the kind of out of body experience this is. Your mind isn't, especially when you've never been in the system. And I was like, okay, I know I can call the fat man, which is what I call my lawyer, this obese guy, Gorski, hero of mine. I was like, you guys got to just take me to jail. Like the jig's up. I'm going to call home and be embarrassed. And yeah. So anyways, so now I'm down in 23-1, the fucking, Multnomah County Justice Center, right? Just like really like in it. I'm fucked in the game, as they say.
All right. So now you're in jail, and this is the first time you're really ever been locked up.
Yeah.
You get into it with a white guy right when you get there.
Cameron was his name. Nice guy. Eventually, we ended up bidding together. We were at the same penitentiary. But yeah, it was just a fade, just the first fade you got to take when you're new in jail. So we go into the bathroom. We're in fucking sandals. That's how new I am. I don't even have the shoes yet off the commissary. And I tied my knuckles up in some fucking tissue paper just so I wouldn't fucking, break my hand. And we just squabbed for like what felt like 5 minutes, but was probably 45 seconds. And, you know, I touched him up. He got the best of me. He was like, I'm 6'6", 200 maybe. And he was 6'3", but jacked, shaved head, career Peckerwood white boy. So he tuned me up, but he didn't put me on my pockets. I was like, just stay on your feet.
Okay, so you're going through the county and you get into a whole bunch of fights.
Whole bunch of fights. Well, I was fighting my case for 8 months.
Yeah.
Whole bunch of fights, bro. And I'm not a tough guy, but it's like you're in there so long, I have to fade if it's presented to me. So,
I mean, is that pretty much the norm? Can you go to county jail and just keep to yourself and not get into any fights?
Sometimes, but I'm in the high security dorms. So a lot of times it's just white gangbanging trying to get me to come along, and I'm not a joiner, and I'm not, I'm just not going to be a part of that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not playing racial politics. I have real problems. So I don't know what it was about me, but they had a real, there was people that just had real problems that wanted to probably look tough for their gangs, and they see a guy who looks like easy lunch, right? So I think that's what it was. Like, I don't think it was really totally personal most of the time, but I would get sent to the hole, and I loved it because now I got some jerk time. I can be away from these fucking animals on the dorm. But the problem is, every time you go to the hole, you get a ticket, you get written up. So by the time I actually go to the penitentiary, my points are like, I'm like a high security threat, or I'm a high security inmate now. So
right.
That's what sent me to a max when I should have probably been in a fucking camp.
Okay, so after 8 months, what did you plead to? Because you didn't go to court, right?
No. I mean, I went to court a bunch for bail hearings, for the whole rigmarole.
But you didn't go to trial.
No, didn't go to trial.
Yeah.
So we forfeited. So the DEA keeps, they leave me in jail for a couple of weeks, and they come by, and these are nice guys. I felt bad that I felt bad for kind of being a piece of shit to the cops. They're just doing their job. They were like, look, are you ready? Like, we just come on, dude, this is not a place for you. Just, you can work for us, get out, right? We'll plead to something very, very benign. And, but my lawyer was like, look, dude, if they don't really have a lot of evidence, they don't have a lot of federal evidence that ties you to anything. They have a shitload of cash.
That's it.
Yeah. Now, yes, you fucking ran from the cops. You tried to bribe them. You do have a probation violation. You're going to go down. But if you go to work for the feds, there's no out date like prison. You work until they say you can go home. And so, I mean, it was the best piece of advice I ever got, because we negotiated to forfeit all of the cash they had found, plus everything else that I had, mostly, right?
Mostly.
So at the end of the day, they got over $1 million cash that I voluntarily turned over, and the feds not really having anything, and being from a place, mind you, where I'm like a mid-level drug trafficker to them. I'm not even like the big fish. That's how much weed was getting shipped out of Oregon. They have bigger cases. So they turned it over to the state. And so now I'm just grappling with the state, right?
Oh, so the Fed case turned into a state case.
That's right.
I never hear about that. It's usually the other way around.
And that's why it's a fucking crazy story. I basically bought my way out of, because the feds want to be sure that, I mean, the feds could have made a case on me, but it's like money laundering. So they can't tie it to drugs. I don't know. Maybe you'll be able to buy your way out. And what they tell you is they want your money more than your life. So they turned it back over to the state, to the Multnomah County. So I go to state court now. And if you hold out, if you can stay in jail and hold out like the way I did, because they try to keep you in there as long as they can to squeeze you because you're suffering in there. It's real suffering is the only way I can describe being in county jail for extended periods of time. You're more likely to like accept what they want. And so I hung in there and I pled to, I think, 38 months, and I got the option of doing a drug program, which could get 6 months cut off my sentence plus my good time.
All right, so that's a little over 3 years, so 2.5 years, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you get sent to a real state penitentiary.
Yeah.
Level 3.
Yeah, bro. And if I had known, like in hindsight, I think if I knew what I was walking into in state prison, if I could have taken the same amount of time in the feds, I'm not sure I wouldn't have taken the fed time instead, right? But anyways, whatever. So yeah, I'm in a state prison, and it's not like a California prison. It's not like going to Folsom or whatever. But the same kind of problems do exist, but just a little bit on a reduced scale. You know, so people got sliced up. There's a prison riot that breaks out at one point. Drugs everywhere. Gang banging. Yeah.
Well, you said your first day there, you saw someone get killed.
Yeah, I didn't know he died at the time, but we're getting off the chain from the, Coffee Creek, which is like where it's the prison. I was at a prison for a month where they choose to decide where to ship you, right? So we're getting off the chain and lining up, and they're getting ready they're uncuffing everybody as they go just down the line, uncuffing. And then this fucking giant, like, Samoan guy turns to this dude standing next to him and just whack. Like, I didn't even know he got hit, and I just hear ooh, boom. Guy hits the ground. They hit the Samoan guy with mace. It's windy, so the mace is fucking flying at everybody's faces. We're fucking, kissing the concrete. And I'm just like, man, I am so far from Colombia right now. That's all I could think. I am so far from Cartagena. Like, it was a nightmare. So that guy ended up dying. And the Samoan guy was doing life. So what's another life sentence? But to see that people not value, not even other people's lives, their own lives, that was the hardest part, dude. That was the hardest part about prison, I think, was like looking at dead men walking. That's kind of what I would see when I was talking to lifers. I celled up with a lifer. I'm like, wow, this is it. This is the end of the road. That was tough for me.
Well, I guess on the first day in prison, you had a cellmate who was a snitch.
Yeah. No, not a snitch.
He had paperwork.
Bad paperwork.
Bad
paperwork. But
isn't that snitching?
It's snitching or sex offending.
Sex offender. Okay.
So he was a sex offender.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. I got to beat this guy up. Like,
Well, because one of the white shot callers told you that you had
they were like, that guy's got bad paperwork, so you're gonna handle it, right? And I was just like, yeah,
You agreed to it.
What was I gonna say? No. I mean, I guess I could have said no.
Yeah, you could have said no.
But then what? They're gonna run me off the yard? Like, I'm not getting run off the yard. I didn't make it this far through all of that shit to now go be in PC, be in protective custody with guys like this. So I was...
Well, hold on. Why not? I mean, you're not a gangster. You're not a lifer.
Right.
You're not a killer.
Right.
Me personally, I'm going to PC. Like, I'm not playing this gang game. I'm not going along with this. If I have to be in PC,
sure,
I'll be in PC. I know some of my friends like Boosie are like, no, I'm not going to be in PC. I'll be in PC.
As sagely older men with resources and experiences and shit to lose, yes. If I had to do it again, I'd be like, okay, if I can behave myself for 6-10 months, I'm gonna be out of here. Yeah. I don't care what these assholes think.
Right.
But at the time, like, there was this like hardened, grizzled like pride that had built up in me. Plus, I was like, I'm just gonna go in and give this guy like a 2-piece and a biscuit, and then they'll have to ship him out. But as soon as I walk in there, this guy, I was like, paperwork. And he already knew kind of what time it was. He goes, he goes, I'm in here for statutory rape. He's like, you got to run me off the yard, but let me do this. I'm going to take myself out of here right now. So the guy was kind of cool. Like, he got it. And he goes up to the window and he goes, guard, I need help. He goes, guard, guard, guard. And the guard comes running over, right? So the other inmates could hear, it sounded like I was fucking him up. Like, it sounded like I was about to like go in on this guy. And the guard goes, he could see that I wasn't doing anything to him.
Huh.
And he goes, oh, you need to get out of here. And so the guy turns around, they handcuff him and they take him to the hole. So he actually did that for me. So he saved me another hole shot or, God forbid, another charge.
Well, then you get a new cellmate, and he's a Hell's Angel.
Yeah, Jimmy DeSort was his name. James DeSort. You can look him up. I don't know if he's still living or not. And that was a trip. Yeah, now I'm locked up with like a shot caller, and he's the real deal.
Okay, and he gets you a knife.
Yeah, he got me a knife. And I would move knives for him. Like, if he needed me to like bring it to, you know, a certain cell, because we never kept shit on us. You know what I mean? And sometimes like I would take balloons for him.
Okay, you're kind of glossing this part over, but when you talk about moving knives and drugs and balloons, this is known as boofing.
Right.
Which means you put it up your anus.
I never boofed a knife. And by the way, when we're talking knives, these are not like bone crushers like they have in the feds. They're fucking whittled down toothbrushes. They're razors, you know, cut off and fastened around the end of a pencil or whatever.
Regardless of what that is, you don't want to stick that up your butt. Okay, I don't care how small of a knife that is. You don't want to put it up your butt. Okay, like
maybe you do.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, so I never boofed a knife or anything like that. But yeah, I boofed a fucking balloon.
Okay, sure. I mean, the first time you did that, was there like a thought of like, I grew up in a nice 2-family, you know, 2-person middle-class family, and now I'm sticking a balloon filled with drugs up my butt.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I am now on a different planet.
It did.
Yeah.
For sure. I'm like, this is wild. But, you know, you're in survival mode, so you're like, oh, just be cool. Like, nothing's happening. Like, he was celled up a lot, meaning he wasn't even allowed to leave his cell. So that's why he'd be like, hey, just take this down to the house as you're coming out to yard, you know, slit me the fucking razor, you know, drop this off at, you know, whatever, 3C, right? Shit like that. But the balloons, when they would come into the prison, I think he had a guard in the kitchen where I was working. I got a job, which is a terrible idea. You should never get a job in prison. Don't give them your labor, right, for basically free. But I was working in the kitchen, and so he'd be like, hey, because I wasn't gangbanging, I wasn't affiliated. I was like the square, I was the fish out of water guy the whole time. Where people were like, what are you doing in here, young man? I'm like, it's a great question. So it would be like you'd get this little balloon. It was either crystal or weed. There wasn't a lot of heroin in there. I don't think anybody has coke in prison because it doesn't last long enough. I don't know, but I didn't see any. It was just crystal and some weed. So yeah, you're shoving that balloon with the tiny little, whatever, opening up. It's like a tampon, right? That's how you pull it out. And so I looked at it as I'm walking back from the kitchen at the end of my shift to the cell block. I'm like, pretended I was on the highway with a bunch of weed. You don't even consider there's even a chance that you could get caught. And you put yourself in that state of mind. So it really wasn't until I got classed down to like minimum where I was like, wow, what a fucking asshole. What an asshole I was. What a piece of shit. So it doesn't really hit you at the time until later, you know. But Jimmy, you know, I did that for him a couple of times, and I would favors like, you know, moving the burners around, we called them. But he eventually, as he got to know me, he was like, oh, we really built this bond. And he was like, I want you to get out. And I told him I wanted to go to Hollywood. I was writing screenplays at night by candlelight and all this fucking weird shit. And he was like, okay, I don't think you got to be clean from now on. We got to get you out of here. And so, it ended up being like a real, like, kind of special relationship. And he was the reason I didn't have any more problems. Like, he was like, I was kind of untouchable. He told the white guys, like, you don't harm a hair on his head.
I mean, were you seeing any rapes in prison?
Mm-mm.
No.
That's pretty much a myth. I mean, I know there are, no, it's
not a myth.
It's not a myth, but it's...
Depends where you go.
You're right. I mean, there was some gay shit going on in there for sure. I mean, I think 99% of the, we'll call it whatever, the butt fucking, you can delete that.
That's fine.
Most of the butt fucking is consensual.
Okay.
I'm not saying prison rape isn't a thing, but it's most of the gay shit is consensual. Anybody will tell you that.
So there was a lot of gay inmates?
No, it's straight inmates who are doing decades, who are either turning out a gay inmate or they're just on the low, Yeah,
I mean, the whole turning out thing. I remember I interviewed Terrence Gangster Williams, who did 25 years or something. And he would talk about what he would see, like the older guys trying to turn out the younger guys. They would say things like, your hand can't be gay.
Right. There was this saying, the saying in where I was at, 6 months to the gate. If you quit doing gay shit 6 months before you get out, not technically gay.
That's the funniest thing I've ever heard.
It was the funniest shit.
As long as you stop being gay for 6 months, you're technically not gay, according to this rule book. Okay.
God's looking down like, oh, no, he's good.
Okay, so you can be gay for 5 years, but as long as that's last 6 months?
Exactly. That was the saying in there.
Okay.
Then they would yell, disengage. That's if a guard's caught you fucking, they would yell, disengage. So that was like the joke. If you heard that coming from the broom closet in the kitchen, that means there was some hanky-panky going on there. Okay. So,
I mean, what do you think, apart from what we talked about, was the craziest thing that you experienced during that time?
In prison or on the streets?
Prison.
Probably the dude getting smashed the first day. That was just like, it was traumatizing, and I didn't realize it until years later, because you get out and you're running, you're trying to make something of yourself and make up for lost time. And then I had to like sit down with a therapist and like talk it through. And I'm like, that shit was like, I don't know. There's no other word besides like traumatic, And it wasn't anything like, I think I was just drinking too much when I got out, and I was depressed, and I had to talk through experiences like that to make me feel human again,
Well, yeah, you came home in 2012. Mm-hmm. You were 26 years old.
26, yeah.
How much time did you serve from beginning to end?
21 months.
Okay, less than 2 years.
Yeah. Easy.
Well, unless, of course, something bad happened along the way.
It was hard from beginning to end, because your first time in prison is hard. And I didn't have a bail. It's not like I got locked up, right? I got arrested for a drug crime.
No, you were locked up the whole time.
Yeah, I was locked up the whole time.
But you got the time served.
I did.
Yeah.
But like some guys who aren't on probation or don't have these huge like CCE kingpin charges, they're able to bail out. They're able to pay lawyers to delay them as long as possible from going in. They're able to get their affairs in order. I had none of that. I just went from one crazy situation to the next. So yeah, it was I wouldn't do it the same if I ever went back, which I don't plan on.
Well, you said that the crime was worth the time.
Oh, it definitely was.
Really?
It definitely was. Now, getting locked up sucked, but the risk reward, it's like, yeah, dude, there's millions of dollars that I had. I just fucked up.
Well, but you didn't get to keep it. They took it all.
Yeah.
So that million, whatever, let's just say $1 million, just around it, that $1 million that you spent all this time building up and had all these plans for, poof, it's gone.
Sure.
So you lose $1 million, you do a year and a half.
Yeah.
In, really horrific circumstances. Yeah. Was it worth it?
It was. What happened to me, the time in history in the history of like the American black market, the fun I had, the what I learned from it, like when I'm in jail, the first night in jail, I'm looking at my paperwork, the United States versus John Mitchell. I was like, wow, I'm really that important that the federal government of the United States wants to punish me. I had this moment where I was like, oh, maybe other things are possible. Because I never really thought, I always had kind of low self-esteem. I don't know, I was just kind of like a brooding, I was the class clown. I was always like a funny guy, but I never really had confidence that I could do anything special. And when I realized that, I was like, oh, maybe I can put my mind to something productive. And, you know, it only took me a decade, but here we are. I'm on Vlad TV, you know?
Well, in 2022, and this is 10 years after you get out,
Yeah.
you launch your YouTube channel,
Yep.
The Connect.
That's right.
Great name, by the way.
Thanks, man.
And it's at around 1.2 million subscribers.
Yep.
Congrats. A lot of people never reach a million.
Thanks, man. Yeah, one for every dollar I lost.
There you go. And, you know, so you start interviewing other, you know, ex-criminals and so forth on the channel. And you said that most of your biggest interviews are with white prisoners.
Yeah. People seem to be obsessed with that for some reason. They love to hear about, like, yeah, gangbanging in prison, you know, especially from, like, you know, we've had some Aryan Brotherhood guys on. We've had some, you know, guys from different, you know, white gang sets. I think white boys take prison so seriously that, yeah, there's like some kind of mythology around it that people are fascinated by. But, you know, we've also interviewed Freeway Rick and interviewed these nameless people that have, you know, nobody knows them, but they worked for, you know, they've been on Chapo's ranch, right? So it's usually the anonymous people that I interview, the people that aren't these celebrities like Sammy the Bull, even though he was a great interview. It's the people that nobody knows that actually have the wildest stories.
Yeah, I've interviewed Michael Thompson, who's a former leader of the Aryan Brotherhood. And I've interviewed Hell's Angels guys and everything else like that. Yeah, you're right. The views, you don't think it's going to be a big interview, and you check back a couple months later, and it's like, yeah, this Michael Thompson interview's at almost 2 million views.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Sammy the Bull, I've interviewed him twice.
Yeah.
And you actually kind of dissed him.
Did I diss him?
You said Sammy will do an interview for the cost of a coach ticket at American Airlines and a couple of nights in a hotel, and he's broke.
Vlad, you're not supposed to say this.
I mean, you said.
We got a viral moment. I know. I say a lot of stupid shit. I try to bribe the cops. I can't keep my mouth shut. No, Sammy, I don't think he has a lot of... I mean, I was just telling Adam what it takes to get him on the show, you know? I don't think I dissed him. He was one of the best interviews. I mean, he was a gangster. And if you go watch our interview with him, by the end, I'm like, Sammy, I like you. Like, they've gotten you wrong, and they should have made and I know I'm kissing up to him now, but they should have done a show about him, because Gotti was the one that fucked up the mob. Sammy stayed down until the end, and I don't blame him for what he did. But by the end, I was like, I probably would have turned on John too. But yes, I did diss Sammy, and because I like to get a laugh. What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Yeah, I remember my last interview with Sammy the Bull. He talked about how he tried to extort Donald Trump, but he couldn't get next to him because Trump had like Secret Service guys around him, and it just wasn't going to work. And Donald Trump posted this part of the video on his Instagram, like his official Donald Trump Instagram. He's like, Sammy's all in the comments like, oh, I love you, you're my president. And I'm like, this is kind of surreal right now. There's a Vlad TV clip with Sammy the Bull on the former president's Instagram. It was really a weird day that day, let me tell you.
Isn't it amazing what this job can lead to sometimes?
And I've never even met Trump. So it's like, it's not like I called in and say, hey, post this for me. No,
Do you think you could get Trump on? I bet you could get Trump on.
I've had conversations with his people, but interviews like that takes multiple layers to get through. Like the guy I would work with, that's like part of his media team, would love me, and we'd have multiple calls and Zooms and everything else like that. He's like, no, I think it's going to happen. And then he runs it up the line, and the third guy up says, no, we shouldn't do this. And then,
Yeah, and that's like what you do when you go to pitch a movie.
Yeah.
This producer loves it, but yeah, it only takes one person to fuck it all up.
Yeah, I mean, if I ran into him and we had a conversation, maybe it would happen, but I'm never around Donald Trump, so.
Right.
But I also haven't had, I've never done any presidential interviews, but, I interviewed Westmore, who's the governor of Maryland.
You had Eric Prince on here?
Who?
Eric Prince you had on here?
Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater.
Yeah, we had him on.
Yep. Vivek, who was running for president under the, Republican ticket. I mean, he was running for nomination, but he was running against Donald Trump. So, everyone knew that wasn't going to happen. We've had some interesting people. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Mm-hmm.
He was running for president.
Yep.
So we've had some interesting political figures, but no presidents yet. But, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And you talked actually about paying for interviews, and you referenced me at one point.
What did I say? I maybe talk shit about you too.
I don't think you talk shit about
I'm always taking little funny digs at you. Whenever
really?
people talk shit, people say, because I do a podcast. What you do was an inspiration. You and Soft Wine Underbelly, I was like, I want to do what they do, but make it a podcast. This is more of an interview.
Yes.
Right? So whenever people are like, oh, John, just let your guests talk. I'm like, if you want a guy that just asks questions, like he's reading off, cue cards, I was like, go watch Vlad. That's fine. This is a little, I go back and forth. You know what I mean? It's just a difference.
Yeah. I think the conversation was about paying for interviews. And you say you do pay for some interviews. You do put guests in hotels.
Yeah.
And you said the problem that Vlad runs into is that he's such a household name. People assume he's got all this money and they want to be transactional with him.
Yeah. Do you have that problem?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. People have quoted me ridiculous prices. I don't know if you've noticed, me and Marlon Wayans were going back and forth at one point because he wanted $40,000 plus 30%. And
in what world does he think this kind of shit
I know.
makes sense?
I know. So, I was an asshole and I made it all public, and then, it became a whole big thing, but whatever. But yeah, a lot of times you get these insane asks and you're like, nobody on earth is going to pay you this. Not just me. Like, nobody on earth will pay this. But if you don't believe me, go and check around.
Yeah. Go ask around.
Go ask around. If you get it, great.
Next time that happens, give him my number.
Yeah.
Just so I can corroborate what you say, right? I had Michael Corleone Blanco. Can I throw this out?
Yeah, I interviewed
him. Yeah, nice guy. Seems like a cool guy. His story is what it is. It's his mom's story.
Yeah.
But he's
part of the story also.
Yeah. He wanted like 50 bands. And I'm like, my guy, how do you think I'm going to make a profit off of that?
Yeah.
Like, it's just not... It's not something we're not dealing in these kind of economies of scale, right? It's not television.
Yeah, if it was Netflix, I paid Michael Corleone Blanco. It wasn't $50,000, but I paid him, and ultimately it was profitable.
Okay.
So, what I paid him was our business, but he didn't hit me with $50,000.
Right.
A lot of times I feel like, and this is was the whole thing with me and Marlon, was when he hit me with $40,000 plus 30% of all the future revenue. When me and him started DMing about it, and then we eventually talked on the phone, I just said, I would much rather you just say that you don't fuck with me and you're just giving me a fuck you price, as opposed to giving me a price that's so ridiculous that I'll never be able to make that back.
Right.
Just be honest with me, because if I don't want to do something with someone, I will give a silly price, knowing they're not really going to go for it.
Right.
And if by some chance they do, okay, fine, I'll do it then. If someone asks me to do an interview and I tell them $50,000, that really means I don't want to do it.
Sure.
But, in terms of people that I really rock with, when you see me on No Jumper or Academics or The Breakfast Club or I'm trying to think, or Math Hoff or whatever else, no money ever changes hands between us.
We're promoting.
Yeah.
It's all
like,
promotion.
all right, do my podcast. I'll do yours afterwards, at some point. It doesn't have to be one for one, but just know that we rock with each other and there's an actual mutual benefit for us doing each other's platform.
That's right. And the thing with the weigh-ins is they're from legacy media.
Yeah.
They're from a time, like, I don't think any of them do podcasts. So
no,
they're from a time where, you would get 40 Gs for like a TV spot.
Well, and that was the thing when the person that was negotiating on his behalf, which he said was the person, who was official, she said, well, this is based on how much he charges to do a show. And it's like, but it's not a show.
CBS doesn't just make money off television.
Yeah.
They sell, they're owned by Viacom. They sell fucking dishwashers and they own 50 different companies.
No, exactly. Like, look, if our interview was filmed live at, a big comedy club and people were paying at the door and they're eating chicken fingers and pizza and buying a 2-drink minimum and, doing meet and greets at the end and so forth. Yeah, 40,000. Yeah, no problem. Let's do it.
Yeah.
That actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that's actually a relatively doable number if we're doing all that.
Right.
But when we're sitting down and 90% of the money, 95% of the money is made from YouTube.
Right.
To get 40,000, you have to get millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of views. And, and he got a lot of views on Shannon Sharp,
right?
Which was billed as the response to Vlad. But then he goes and does Shaq's podcast and he gets about 400,000 or 500,000 views.
Yeah, right.
Which is what I expected to get.
Sure.
And that's not 40,000.
No.
So.
And I doubt he's getting paid to be on Shannon Sharp's podcast.
And I don't think that Shaq paid him either. I think he's doing it all free. And when we talked, he even admitted, because I said, listen, I know for a fact you doing Breakfast Club, you doing Drink Champs. I go on, I've been on these platforms.
Yeah.
I'm not getting paid.
Right.
And I'm sure you're not either. He goes, no, I'm not. But I have relationships with these guys, so, that's why I'm doing it for free. So I'm like, all right, so this is...
And here's the thing. And I'm glad that I'm talking to you because you are a self-made internet guy, just like I am a self-made internet guy. There's many podcasts now that are started by guys that got rich doing something else. You've had a few of them on their show. They pay dumb money sometimes to get guests on. That's another thing, right? Because it doesn't matter because they've started, some kind of MLM, multi-level marketing company, and say they got a podcast out of Florida and they're fucking annoying, right? Though that kind of podcast can just pay to get the best talent on. So I think it also sets an unrealistic bar for what is actually profitable for creators like us that actually we do this. This is how we make money.
Well, yeah, it has to be profitable. You have to, between the appearance fee, the production cost, the location, the camera people, the security, whatever else, the overhead.
Yeah.
If it doesn't make money, there's no point in doing it. I personally think some of these podcasts I think are drug fronts. Because
that could be that.
Some of the money that I've heard that they're paying, and then you see the interview come out and it's like 10,000 views, and I'm like, okay. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Like, this person got paid this much and it got 10,000 views, which is, I don't know, $1,000 maybe if you're lucky. Like, maybe $800. Like, so it's like, it's messed up the business. And people blame me on messing up the business because I think I was the first person to actually start paying. Especially in my space.
Right.
Before, it was taboo to pay for interviews.
Right.
This is journalism. You don't pay because it somehow affects what the person says. But my thing was like, this is a new business. This is not the news. This is not radio, traditional radio anymore. These interviews go up and they monetize. And sometimes when they're evergreen, they'll monetize for years and years. There is real money being made. I built a business that was also really focused on repeat guests, regular guests that come in every couple months to talk about current events and everything else like that. And yes, some of these people are my friends and, we do have a big platform and they understand that and I could pull favors and I can convince them to do it. But it's not like saying, something, fuck all that. I'll just pay you an agreed upon amount every time you come in.
Yeah.
You come in, It makes financial sense for you. It's profitable for me. Everybody wins. 2 months later, you'll be back with the same deal.
Yep. It's great.
And,
it's great.
The wheel keeps spinning.
It becomes like a segment on like
it
a television
becomes a
show.
segment. It's just like, when you see contributors on CNN, they get paid to come in,
right.
On a regular basis and everything else like that. But if you're coming in every so often, like I just did Peter Smorgan, I didn't get paid anything.
Right.
I've done it like 5 times.
Right.
I don't mind though. I mean, he has a big platform.
Of
He's respectable, a big name in media.
And you don't have to travel to him.
No,
there you go.
They send a van to my house.
Right, there you go.
I literally jump in this media van and I just do it that way.
You don't even put pants on. It's like you
don't
are
even
now,
put
dude.
pants on.
So that's how I feel. Like if people want to come promote their show on my platform, because a lot of these ex-kingpins, prisoners, whatever, they're trying to get their own shit. They're trying to sell books. They're trying to, get people over to their YouTube. So I'll fly you out as a show of good faith because I respect you. A lot of people don't live in LA. I'll fly you out. I'll put you up for a couple nights. But the promotion is the payment, Yeah. But if somebody's got an amazing story, so my show's not built off repeat guests.
Yeah.
That's the tough part is I always have to keep upping myself.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah.
But that's why, we'll be pivoting soon. But if I got a guy with an unbelievable story that hasn't been on Vlad yet, I'm trying to get him first. He deserves to be paid because just flying him out and putting him up, flying him all the way across the country and putting him up in a hotel, he's still, he should be, there's value in what he's doing. Yeah. So it's kind of like on the strength, right?
Well, you said that the cartels don't respect LA Mexican gangsters.
Yeah, I kind of stand by that. I know.
Also, explain.
Well, they don't view them as really Mexican, I don't think.
Well, they're Chicano,
they're Chicano,
Mexican American.
But I've heard gabacho thrown around from, we've been down in Mexico filming, we've been to Culiacan, we've talked to these guys, we talked to bodyguards who were guarding El Mayo, a year and a half before he gets arrested. So, wow. We've had our Chicano, a guy who's a Chicano, like a crew member with us, and they call him gabacho. So, yeah.
Gabacho means what?
Gabacho means like white boy. They usually use it to refer to white boys. Oh, okay. Gabacho Ojuero. But so now they're calling this brown guy who's from LA a gabacho Ojuero.
That's crazy. Okay.
So they are not the same. And they don't look at Mexican Americans like they're paisa.
But don't they work with the American Mexican gangs to distribute their stuff?
They do for sure. But it's not,
it's not exclusive.
It's not exclusive, and I really doubt that they are. Yeah, it's not exclusive, and I think most of the work now is dumped off COD. From what I can tell, and from who I talk to really high level people on both sides of the law, the cartel rarely has their own people posted up in cities anymore, getting it off for them. They might have somebody who warehouses the meth in Bakersfield. But from there, they're selling it COD, wholesale, cash, to freelancers, and then boom, fleeing back across the border. So it's not, it's very decentralized now, the cartel. And that happened, definitely, it's been coming for a long time with the way that technology is. But after Chapo fell in 2016, I believe, for the final time when he got extradited, the Sinaloa cartel completely, it's separated into 2 factions, the Chapitos and the Maitos. Right, people loyal to Mayo, and now they're basically become like a paramilitary army who protects independent drug traffickers. Does that make sense? And once it reaches the United States, they take the money and it's out of their hands.
Well, I've had 5 people on my show that I've interviewed that have died of fentanyl overdoses. Most recently, Rich Homie Quan. There was also, Coolio, Gangster Boo, Aaron Carter.
Did you have Omar? Michael?
No, I'd met him, but I never interviewed him.
He died of fentanyl-laced weed.
Yeah.
What is his name? Michael?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. God damn it. Michael B. Coop?
No, the guy who played Omar on the Wire.
Yeah.
Yeah. I named 4 people. I know there's one other person who I've interviewed who's died. Mac Miller. Did I mention him?
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
Mac Miller. That was the That was the last one. Now, but you said that the cartels are not the ones that are adding fentanyl to the cocaine.
Nope. I'm convinced of that. Now, nobody knows for sure a lot of the cartel business because it's taken from, journalists who've talked to them, and the game is different across the board. But one thing I'm pretty certain of is that they are not the ones that are mixing the fentanyl with the coke. Why would they do that? In fact, they started pressing fentanyl into colorful pills when people really started overdosing a couple of years ago as a way to try to keep the coke separate, right? So if you're in America and you see some off-colored powder you're about to sniff and it's got a reddish hue, a bluish hue, an orange hue, you should probably stay away from that.
Yeah, man, it's crazy because, I've never taken cocaine, period, in my life, period. This is a fact. A friend of mine died at 23 off of cocaine, and I went to that funeral saying, I'm never going to try this.
Yeah.
And, just recently I was in Atlanta. I just finished an interview with an artist down there, and a couple of guys walked in, when he walked out, and they offered cocaine to me because they were fans. And I'm looking at him going like, this is crazy. Like, who would take cocaine from a couple of randoms that you just met right then and there? Yeah. With the amount of people dying. Me and Gangster Boo hung out like 3 weeks before she died. Mm. It's so rampant and it's so deadly that it just stuns that people actually take street drugs anymore.
It's crazy.
But this is a thing. And it was interesting. I assumed that the cartels were cutting it or whatever else, but I guess it makes sense. Who wants to send over a bunch of product that kills all the users? Mm-hmm. But you're saying it's the actual dealers that are cutting it.
It's the American dealers that were stretching their coke with fentanyl.
But doesn't the actual fentanyl come from China?
Like China to the ports in Mexico. I think, what is it called? Manzanillo in Colima. And it also goes through the ports of Canada, Vancouver. Now you see Chinese gangs in Vancouver starting to press fentanyl, which is wild.
So people are taking fentanyl straight?
Yes. And in fact, and you can look this up, fentanyl overdoses are down this year.
Really?
Yes. And that's because people are getting a tolerance to it. It's basically a brand
People are getting a tolerance to fentanyl.
And they're just doing the fentanyl now. Yes.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. So people obviously are still dying because they're getting these mixed drugs. But the population is now building up a tolerance. And that, because demand is not down. I'm convinced of that. I don't think demand is down. It's wild.
Yeah, I remember when I interviewed Turk, from the Hot Boys. Mm-hmm. He said something interesting. Because I remember I brought up, it was a lyric he had. Something like, yeah, we trying to get that stuff that killed that boy. And he talked about how, in these drug communities, when the drug addicts find out that a certain batch killed somebody, they actually rush to that. Mm-hmm. As opposed to common sense saying, okay, we want to stay away from it. They actually rush to it because they know that it's the strongest stuff out there, and they're trying to get so high where they're on the edge of death.
Yeah.
So if you're really a hardcore drug addict, you're actually excited that fentanyl's mixed in with your drugs as opposed to being terrified of it.
I think originally that was in heroin. That was like if somebody OD'd, that's a really good batch.
Yeah.
I don't know that now people are excited about mixed drugs. I think they want the new heroin, which is fentanyl,
Right. And these days, the pills have really taken over completely. You look at, for example, the NBA YoungBoy drug case where he has something like 65 charges in Utah where he was calling in, prescriptions and having girls call in for him. And he would pretend, change his voice and everything. And I think a lot of that comes from the fear of taking fake pills and dying.
Right.
When it comes from the pharmacy, you at least know that that's a real Xanax or that's a real perk.
Yep.
And even for example, Kodak Black, he said, he had that one lyric, I knew the perk was fake, but I still took it because I'm a gremlin. He actually, I think on stage or in an interview addressed that, he said, I actually regret that lyric because this is not something that I do or anyone else should do because It's crazy. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
So now you have this. Like, people understand there's so many fake pills out there laced with fentanyl, whatever else. They're trying to risk their freedom by trying to go to the pharmacies and whatever else.
Right.
I mean, have you seen because you were involved in pills like that. Have you seen the pill thing just kind of skyrocket?
I wasn't involved in pills at all.
Yeah.
I always stayed away. So, shit. I mean, yeah. I think in the hoods now, and I could just go off anecdotal evidence, but like, yeah, down in Watts and all these places in the ghetto, it's like kids are taking these fentanyl pills that are like whatever, 20 milligrams, or well, whatever the fuck it, not 20 milligrams of fentanyl that would kill a fucking elephant, but they're called like 20s.
Yeah.
And they've maybe they're mixed with whatever, but the main ingredient is the small amount of fentanyl. So I don't know.
It's crazy.
I have no solution except that, like, yeah, there's a real deep spiritual problem in communities.
Yeah, I just flew down to Savannah where I interviewed Quando Rondo. And, he was, hooked on drugs for a long time. He's clean now. He's about to get sentenced, for a case. He's been clean for a while. But he said flat out, for young black males, lean is the new crack. It's frowned upon for someone to pull out a crack pipe in front of you and smoke it, right? No one looks up to that. But it's cool to have a double cup of lean.
Right.
But it's heroin.
Right.
Right? It's not cool to pull out a needle and strap your arm up in the studio and start shooting up heroin after laying a verse.
Yeah.
But pouring up, mix it in with some Sprite.
Yeah.
Oh, you're the man.
Yeah.
But it's the same shit. And when he said it's the new crack, I said, you're right. You're right. I hung out with Pimp C a couple weeks before he died off of a lean overdose. Right. And man, it kills a lot of people. It's unbelievably expensive.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. I know people that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars over time on lean.
I think Joel Santana was hooked on that.
Yeah, I mean, there was a whole tea thing. I asked him about that. He kind of danced around that question. But yeah, man, he definitely was hooked on it, and it's very easy. I was hanging out with Riff Raff one day, and he had some lean. He's like, you want to try it? I'm like, all right, fuck it. I tried some lean. I fell asleep. We just eaten a big meal also. That probably contributed to it. So I've tried lean, but I've never actually gotten high off lean. And, in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have tried it at all.
Yeah.
And I'm
Won't touch coke, but we try this lean shit.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've taken ecstasy before. I've taken acid before. I've had a span where I was on mushrooms, taking mushrooms every few weeks. Yeah. But I'm not really like a drug guy like that outside of weed.
Yeah.
I smoke weed pretty much every day, but the hard drugs, it's just not really me. Mm-hmm. And I'm lucky. Because, like I said, I've interviewed 5 people that have died off of overdoses. Mm-hmm. So that could have been me, but luckily it wasn't. But it's very easy to just, especially in coke. Like, I have friends that, hey, the first time I tried coke was off of strippers' titties. We're hanging out with a bunch of girls. They're doing coke. They're making it seem that if I do coke with them, I have a chance to sleep with them. So I try some coke. 20 years later, my friend has no teeth.
Fuck.
And he still lives with his mom. Yeah.
That bad it got away from.
This is some real shit.
Wow.
This is some real shit. And this is one of my close friends.
Wow.
I'm not going to say his name, but this is one of my close friends. I mean, not so much anymore.
Yeah.
But, like I said, we met up after years of not seeing each other. We're having lunch, and he takes his teeth out in front of me. That's like, damn. Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
That's that prison shit, dude. Everybody in there has dentures.
Really?
Because they're all fucking ex-crackheads, meth heads, Yeah, that's the only place where you're like, oh, wow, crack really does exist still. But in a very niche kind of way. There are old smokers. There's guys that have been smoking since the 80s. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, I miss the old days, man. In many ways, when it came to the drug trade, it was a lot simpler times. It was heroin, weed, and coke. That was basically it.
Right.
And it was clean, and it was structured and organized. The prices were not too low. You know what I mean? The hierarchies in the source countries, Colombia, Mexico, controlled everything, and they made sure that the prices didn't bottom out by sending too much product. the world made sense. It doesn't make sense now. It's like everybody can make drugs where they live. And yeah, it's so decentralized that it seems like it's the days of like a kingpin are gone. And the days of doing what I did, just as like me, are pretty much over. So I don't know if people argue that, but if you have to sell all these kind of drugs that kill people and you know, if you're selling lean and I got a box of pills and then I got weed over here and I got sketchy coke over here, I don't want to be involved in that. I want to be a fucking kingpin. You know, I want to be a boss. I want to have this giant wholesale business. And I think that's increasingly hard to do.
Unless you're the cartels overseas.
Yeah.
And they're still fighting it out.
Yeah.
Doing what they do. Well, Johnny Mitchell, man, appreciate you coming in.
This was fun, Vlad.
Yeah. Yeah, man. You know, I always like to really reach out and embrace the next generation of content creators. You know, like seeing the academics come up, I reached out to him early. Charlemagne,
yeah.
I was the first person to put him on a platform outside of South Carolina.
Yeah.
Adam 22, Sean Cotton from Say Cheese, you know, even Nori, you know, was, you know, he was rocking doing interviews with me and then he started his own platform.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I went and did his platform. Like,
yeah.
You know, that type of thing. I always felt like we all do better by working together, by sharing resources. You know, if there's someone I see on someone's platform that I want, I'll reach out to them. You know, Math Hoffa is another one, you know, where we all help each other. I feel like there's enough space for all of us. There's enough viewers for all of us. Just because someone goes on Vlad TV doesn't mean that they're not going to go on the Connect.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? In terms of a viewer.
And that's the winner's mentality. Yeah. See, that's the abundant mindset that you have to have, and that I didn't have back in the day. And it takes a little bit of like growing up and maturing and a little success to realize, oh, that's the way to live.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one more thing that I recently figured out. I was watching the Vince McMahon documentary.
Who?
Vince McMahon.
Oh, okay.
He was the founder of WWE.
Yep.
There's a whole documentary on him on Netflix. And what I learned from watching it was this. You know, a lot of big wrestlers, well, all the major wrestlers went through WWE, right? And along the way, both male and female wrestlers had really bad falling out, you know, would fall out with him, would publicly bash him, would sue him. So, you know, some of the women would sue him for sexual assault and sexual harassment, stuff like that. And the large majority of those people, even after going through the courts and settling with them or whatever else, he would bring them back on to WWE, and the storyline would be their lawsuit.
The greatest promoter ever.
Yo. And he would address and work it into the storyline. Oh, you sued me for sexual harassment, but I'm going to get like, and everyone would get paid, and, you know, the business would continue and it would grow. And I was looking at that going like, damn, like, this is something that I haven't been great at. I have a falling out with someone and it's like, fuck you forever.
Right.
But watching this, I'm going like, at the end of the day, it's just business. These aren't, you know, for most people, these aren't my actual friends. We don't really have relationships outside of the business itself. And I actually learned from watching it. I'm like, yo, I'm about to rethink some of my business strategies here.
The whole world's a stage when you're in this space, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And nobody knows that better than, you're right, wrestlers. Because the whole thing is self-promotion. It's all fake, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, and they even pointed out in the documentary, which I'm always thinking about now, because remember, Donald Trump was a repeat guest on WWE, and they really described how Donald Trump is the first, like, pro wrestling president, and the approach that he takes, where he would just say outlandish stuff, true or false.
Yep.
They would catch him in the lie. He would say it's fake news, or he would start pointing out how broke they are.
Right.
And they just go on to the next topic like
That's
it never
right.
happened. And then he wins.
That's right.
And then now he might win again. You see what I'm saying? Like,
It's wild.
it's wild, man.
But when you talk to him, like, when you catch him in candid moments, he's like, oh, yeah, Bill Clinton's a nice guy.
Yeah.
You know, Kamala's pretty.
Yeah.
Like, the whole, it's just
But it's
marketing,
just a stage.
dude.
It's
right.
just a stage. And, you know, the quicker everyone realizes that and gets out of their feelings and stop, you know, stops being so sensitive,
Yep.
I think everyone will ultimately win.
But Marlon Wayans, we're still not giving you 40 G's, Bubba's. We're still not paying you that. That's ridiculous.
Johnny, man, appreciate you coming in, man. Wish you all the best, and make sure you check out your YouTube channel, The Connect on YouTube.
That's right.
You know, you're doing your thing on it. Congrats.
Thanks, buddy. I had a great time.
No doubt. Peace.
Peace.